All right. So let's get started. Good day, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come join the December meetup for the SuzieQ community. As always, it's a mixed bag. People say we are going to show up, and then at last minute, they get called into some firefight. We have a couple of new people, Ankur and Steven. Welcome. Jeff, haven't seen you in a while, so welcome back. Dwayne, we were chatting yesterday. Claudia always chatting. So anyway, welcome everyone. 1 minute, there's one more person who wants to join. Yeah. So welcome everyone. So, I was reading just 2 days ago, there was a lady, a popular fantasy author who put out a tweet apparently saying like she thought 37 people signed up and they would show up for a book signing and only 2 did, and she was really embarrassed. And then she tweeted that, and she had a whole bunch of people tweet back, including very famous authors like Stephen King, Terry Pratchett, saying like, hey, and Neil Gaiman, saying like, hey, we have had like one person show up to our book signing many times. So I guess I shouldn't worry too much about how many people show up at a meeting. I see a bunch of people also watch the recording. So with that said, let's get started. Can you guys see my screen?
No, not at the moment.
No, not anymore.
Of course not, because I did not hit share because I needed to start the recording. Okay, share screen. Okay.
There we go.
Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. So the plan for today is basically we'll do a little bit of agenda bashing, community news. I'll talk about what's coming in 0.20. Then I thought, based on the session we did last time, a lot of people wrote to me saying that they actually found it very useful to see how I was using SuzieQ because they did not know. Many people just used it in a very simple sense of network show. And it was a network CLI where they basically did a show of various tables across the entire network so they could see it in a single spot as opposed to logging multiple times. And then there are people who have actually done the asserts and they have done a bunch of things, but there are a lot of commands, a lot of options that people did not know about. So I thought one of the things we could do in this session is do something called Ask SuzieQ, where I would ask the people on the call, if you have questions that you want SuzieQ to answer, that you don't know whether it can even answer, and then we can, I can try and show that to you or use that as a mechanism to write down for future enhancements, work that can be done for SuzieQ as we move forward. Then I thought I would kind of break up for a second to ask the community for questions. If the people who are new on the call, you don't mind, I might just ask you, you don't have to reveal anything sensitive that you don't want to reveal. Like if you don't want to reveal the company name, I understand. But if you do, I'm grateful. But I'm looking for, what brings you to SuzieQ? What problems are you looking to solve? And what kind of network do you have? How many devices, what operating systems? Generally, those are the two things that I'm curious about. And mostly I'm curious about them from the perspective of knowing what kind of footprint I have, what kind of testing has already been done. So when someone writes to me and says like, hey, I'm trying this, I know whether this is working or, this is something that is new. Then finally, I thought one of the things that I would like people to be able to do is get started on SuzieQ very quickly. And as part of that, I see many times people write back and say like, hey, we have a problem. We don't know how to debug a particular problem once the poller has started. I thought I could kind of do another walkthrough where I would show you how I do the polling, how I start the poller and how I debug any particular issue. Does anybody have anything else they would like to see on this agenda? As always, please feel free to stop me and ask questions. This is not like wait till the end to ask questions. Ask me any. And please don't feel like you're hijacking the meeting necessarily. At some point, if we start going down a rabbit hole, I'll pull myself out, hopefully, or I'll have one of the others ask us to pull me out. But other than that, please feel free to ask questions. Don't feel like, oh, this is specific to only my network. I don't want to ask about this question, etc., etc. So we did that. So what's coming? It's not 0.20.2, it's 0.20.0. So what's coming? So first of all, this was supposed to be scheduled for 0.19.2, but it didn't really make it into 0.19.2 because there were a bunch of users who were running into some Junos issues. And I'll talk about that when we get into the Polar section. Some of which were real, some of which were not real, but fixing all of them took a little time. And at that point, I felt since nobody was really complaining about 0.19.1, I would wait and just do 0.20.0. So some of the stuff that you see right now is stuff that was scheduled for 0.19.2. So we have a bunch of parser fixes for Junos and iOS specifically. There was a bug in the path that got fixed for, in case of VXLAN, that got fixed by a contributor from the open source world. I mean, they are, I don't know, they didn't give me their name, they didn't say anything. I just found out that they worked at Google, but they fixed a bug in path. And then we have support. I added support for Junos Evo. We have a user who called in saying like, hey, I have difficulty because of the supply chain problems. The only Junos boxes we can get today are Junos Evo. Do you think we'd be able to add support for Junos Evo? Junos devices are pretty good in the sense like their outputs are a little weird. Someone once told me that the Junos output reflects the company organizational structure. So the same output will just have the top level commands, which are a little different, or the table names will be a little different, but otherwise it look exactly the same as everything else. So and every version, Junos SRX is a variant of Junos MX with some changes. Junos QFX 10K is a bastardization of Junos QFX and Junos MX, and every one of them is some variation, and Junos Evo is no different. It's got some command whose outputs look very similar to Junos MX, and some commands whose output looks very much like Junos QFX. So it was not very hard for me to put things together and hand them a version that they declared was working correctly for them. So we are going to have support for Junos Evo in 0.20.0. Is anybody on the call using Junos Evo? This was not a lot of work. It was probably a couple of hours of work, mostly to just get the data from the user in terms of figuring out what the output structure looks like and then rejigging and building. And then we were going to also add support for multicast routes. This is work done by, this is a contribution from a user, Stephen Corey. He's got some work left to add. For example, there is the age of the multicast route that we would like to add, which hasn't been added. But I think we have enough data that we can go ahead and make the thing work. So that's what we're going to do. And then lastly, we'll talk about this when we get to the Polar. We found a problem that originally was working a particular way, but during the process of cleaning up the Polar, making it battle hardened, this kind of fell apart. And now we are adding that back again, which is SuzieQ today in the current version, that is 0.19.1, does not detect reboots correctly. And we'll talk about that in the fix when we get to the Polar section. So those are the main features coming in 0.20.0. In the subsequent release, we will have support for, once we do the reboot detection fix, we can take into account other devices whose contributions are in the pipeline. Jeff has contributed some Alcatel code so to support Alcatel platforms. So we'll be adding support for those. Someone else has contributed support for a checkpoint and for Cisco firewall. We'll be adding support for those as well, but that will be in the release after 0.20.0 because that requires still some amount of work after the reboot detection fix is done. Any questions on anything I have said so far? Anything that people wish you were expecting to see, you don't see, you would like to see? There will be a bunch of other minor fixes. For example, one of the things that we have done, and I'll show it to you, is in the enterprise release, we have a thing called inventory summarize. The inventory summarize in open source is kind of pretty empty. So we will take care of making sure that that looks similar to the way the enterprise looks. But that's pretty much what I had. There may be a bunch of other minor fixes, but these are the big ones. Any questions? Okay.
Dinesh, just one question. As
Yeah.
you mentioned inventory,
Yeah.
do you get the serial numbers? Take the serial numbers and store
Yes.
those? Because I don't.
Yes.
Okay, maybe I'm missing out because I don't see them in the sort of when I've been looking. So okay, I'll take another look.
When I get to ask SuzieQ the next section, Stephen, why don't you just ask me, how do I see it? I may not be
Sure.
able to show you anything because either A, I have sensitive data which I can't share, or B, I have, what's the word for it? Only my local stuff, which doesn't typically carry the inventory is typically empty or there are no real serial numbers. But I'm happy to share it with you and show you how the serial numbers, where you would find it, so to speak.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other question? Okay. So with that, let's get into this second aspect, which is what I call Ask SuzieQ. So I thought we could kick off by asking some questions of SuzieQ. If you have any specific questions that you would like SuzieQ to answer, but you're not entirely sure how to do it, then we could get started. And I can kick things off by showing you, pointing to a query that someone asked over the, one of the Slack users asked me. And can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, and the font size is good?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fine.
Always remove history to get rid of sensitive information. I have one other thing to do, and I'll do that without 1 second.
Stephen, to your point, I've been using kind of the inventory features a lot. I didn't even think to confirm serial numbers. One of the things that's been happening over the last few weeks is we're using SuzieQ more and more is the things I would normally script, just a quick script to go pull, all serial numbers, for example. I keep having to remind myself that I no longer have to log into a switch and parse the data and, put it together. I can just ask SuzieQ.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's one of the things I'm definitely liking about it. Is that,
Yep.
as you say, it gives you a sort of an overall view of everything that's in there. So.
So the inventory one, we just used it to validate software version on a bunch. We did a refresh at a campus, and so we were monitoring before we went in, and then after we replaced all the switches, we went in just to make sure all the switches were running the right iOS. We did some interesting things with inventory. I think Dinesh will talk about that, right? But we're looking at did every switch get a redundant power supply, that kind of stuff. So it's been really powerful.
Yeah, I guess I should use the describe option a little bit more because I can see that now the serial numbers there, but it's just not part of the standard display. So
Yes. So one of the things I do is with things like inventory, which I don't have a very good sense of how people use it. I want to kind of make sure that I don't, what's the word for it? Make the display too cluttered. One of the things I struggle with very hard to make sure is that the default display that you see with SuzieQ is as good as it gets, meaning you see everything you want to see and not much more. And I have columns which allows you to be able to look at specifics much more cleanly. Because if you don't do that, what you end up happening is the equivalent of what I call Cisco vomit, or in most of these, you got just one option. You got brief, you got regular, or you got vomit. And you're basically eyeballing too much information. So whether it is the GUI or whether it is the CLI, I work at trying to make sure that whatever you have up there is really the best and there isn't anything critical that you would like to eyeball that is missing. If people disagree with some of the columns and you want to see something that isn't there, please let me know. I'm happy to kind of consider adding them in. because at the end of the day, this is all for the purpose of serving the network users. And so it needs to be as good as it can get for them, not from my perspective.
Dinesh, in our last meetup, you went over, how to turn off kind of the row summary, list all the rows, that kind of stuff. Did we talk about kind of setting up default column views for each table?
No, because there is in the enterprise, in the open source, there is no simple way to do it. There is a way to do it, but there is no simple way to do it. So if you can ask that question, Claudia, if you don't mind, at the end of the Ask SuzieQ section, I will show you how to do it in the open source, albeit in a complicated manner. No coding is required, but you will need to do a little bit of minor changes to the JSON schema file.
Because I do wind up, so a typical run for me is, table describe.
Yeah.
Okay, then I wind up with a column equals, right, in a little, notepad.
Yeah.
Or text, text editor that I just continually paste into my queries.
Yeah. I don't have a way to make the default be different in the open source. Maybe that's something to think about, but I can show you with what you have right now, how to actually go do that so that you will always see the ones that you care about and not ones that Dinesh decided was the right set of columns to look at.
Having said that, it's not, that is a small price to pay for all the data that I have at my fingertips now with SuzieQ. So
thank you. No, but again, at the same time, right? I mean, my point is to reduce the number of clicks that any user has to do, the number of times somebody has to type something. So the number of times you have to type columns equals, if I can reduce that, that would be good. And if I can show you how to do it at your own end, then, there's a lot of customization that is possible, which we do in the enterprise, but I can show you how to do it, how to do some of those things. Not all of them are possible in the open source, but some of them are easily doable in the open source, and I'll show you how to do them at the end of this Ask SuzieQ. Just ask me, because I consider that an advanced thing. So instead of spending time on that, I thought I'll do that at the end. Though I'm happy to do it right now. It doesn't really change the flow in any significant way.
no, I didn't mean to interrupt the flow.
No,
so
you're not interrupting at all, Claudia. Thank you for asking that question. It's actually quite easy. One of the things, again, I have tried to do with SuzieQ is try to keep it in such a way that users can progress without requiring me to come in every single time. It may require you to do a few things, but you can always come in and proceed without requiring Dinesh to intervene. I try and do that as much as possible. I like to make myself obsolete as quickly as I can, because then I can go on to do other things. Okay, so let's start with a simple one. I'll start this query first with a simple one, which is a user said, hey, I have this situation. Actually, Claudia, it was you. Maybe if you want to ask me the multi-max question, I forgot for a second that it was you. Then maybe you can give the context as well if you want to, and then I can show you how I did that.
Of course. So one of the things we've been doing, both as part of a refresh program that I'm involved with, as well as a security program, is that we're trying to find non-CDP and LLDP switches or hubs, I hate to say it, behind the switches that SuzieQ is monitoring. And so I had asked Dinesh, hey, is there a way I need to look at every non-uplink user or user interface that has multiple Macs behind it?
Yeah.
So that was the kind of the driving force. And then for every one of those, I would then do like LLDP on the interface and see, what's at the other end. Okay, it's a Cisco phone and a Dell laptop. Okay, I don't care about that port. I don't care about that one. Now here's this thing with 5, nothing LLDP. Okay, I we need to investigate what's behind this port kind of thing.
All right. So with that said, basically for those of you who don't know, every table has a set of common functions, and you can find out what those functions are by typing any table. So for the sake of this discussion, we'll use Mac. And as you've seen with the CLI, it is user-friendly. It tries to help you at every step to be able to do what you are trying to do. So in this case, if you type Mac help, you will get a set of options, and you'll see that basically one of them is this thing called unique. And using unique, you can find out all kinds of interesting things about a particular table. And for example, in Claudia's case, she said, hey, I want to be able to go look at every interface that has more than one Mac on it. So basically the model here then is Mac table is the one you want to look at because she's asking for more than one Mac behind an interface. So you say Mac unique. The column I'm looking for is OIF because that's the outgoing interface. And I want to know how many are behind each one. And what I do right now, this is something that you cannot do in the open source, but you can kind of play a game. You can say columns equals OIF, and you can give the namespace. So in my case, I have say NXOS, and I'll give a single host name here. Let's give it a host name of LeFo1. And if you say, show me this, what you get is, and you say count, because you want to see the count. You get a list and it says here, port channel 3, you have 1, VLAN 999, you have 2, port channel 4, you have 3. All of these are interfaces because this is a layer 3 device. There is not really much going on, but port channel 3 and port channel 4 are the user ports, are the server ports. And it's behind those that you see these two things. And you see that port channel 4 has actually 3 MAC addresses behind it, whereas port channel 1 has only a single one. So using this technique, you can say like, hey, I see that port channel 4 is the problem because it has more than one behind it. So you could play this game, and for if you want to do it via a script, you can just write a little Python program to do it via a script. Alternately, what you can do in enterprises, you have other sophisticated features to use this so that you can look across the entire network to get this specifically for every single device. But for now, you just type this command and you should be able to use Mac unique with this column and this thing, which tells you, is there a port, server port with a set of interfaces that you should not be looking at. If you say like, Dinesh, can I reduce this somehow? Can I filter out certain things from here? You can by using, so we have this, what I call the Hail Mary pass, which is query string, which basically takes a pandas format. You can simply say, I only want to look at those which are port channels. Or you can say, because all your server ports are dual attached, and therefore they're always behind a port channel, you can all say that I want to only look at port channels. You can also give regular expressions if you want. But what you can do here is you can say OIF.str starts with port channel. And now you will only get the list, which is the port channel. And if you want to only get those which have a count of greater than 1, and you can say number of rows greater than 1, and you'll get just those. So this is a quick, simple way for you to figure out what ports are there behind, what ports you have, which are, got more than one MAC address behind them, so to speak. Make sense? Any questions on this? Okay. Who wants to ask the next question? If you have anything specific, I'm happy to show. Oh, Stephen, you asked me about inventory. Where is inventory present? You did the correct thing. You did inventory describe, and you saw that there was a serial number sitting there. Where is that? It's called serial, I think. Yes, there is a serial number there. So you can get that. You can also get it out of device show. So if you do device show, and you say columns equals serial number, I believe is the thing. No. Device describe. Is it serial there to serial number? You get the serial numbers that you're looking for. So it's also on the device. On the device,
Okay.
what you get is the chassis device number typically. And if you have got specific inventory device numbers, like, what's the device number what's the serial number for a power supply, what's the serial number for a fan, you would use inventory to get that.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
And the basic idea behind inventory is to not only show you what is there, but also to help you, for example, if you're trying to do an RMA, to be able to do an RMA quickly by finding all the information you want associated with that device. So from that perspective, if anything in the inventory is missing, anything in the default inventory output should be used to show things, please let me know. I'm happy to show them to you.
Dinesh, one of the things we often need to do as part of that refresh project is to have a better understanding of the optics, like SFP, SFP plus. What do you have in there? Like, I'm assuming it would be in part num?
I believe it's either in the part number, different people put it in different places. I believe it's either in the part type or it is in description, one of the two places.
Okay.
Again, I unfortunately can't look for that information because in this particular table, if I just said that, you know, right now, if I set it to my tests, I really don't have any data to show you. So if I do inventory show, you get this information. And in here, it just says port adapter. It doesn't tell you what kind of port adapter it is. If instead you could, yeah, you don't have, because you see, these are all MX chassis. That's the only one that in my output has some information. And that doesn't give me the information on the transceivers because it's all dummy stuff.
Yes, no, I'll definitely try it.
Yeah. But I do know that someone did ask me for that specific information of, you know, is it QSFP plus, is it SFP plus? And I did point out where it was and they found it. I just don't remember off the top of my head because it's not a command I use because clearly I don't have the data to necessarily see it here. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's in part type.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is fantastic. I can see this is a Cisco. I can see the module, the stacking cables, and the optics.
Perfect. So you got it.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have another question you want to ask of SuzieQ?
Is there a list of columns that are searchable with a query string? Because I've been trying something and I can't seem to get it to work. So it was around the sort of the sort of interface assert, and what I was trying to do was just filter on the asserts that had failed. So I was sort of looking for doing like a query string where the result column is fail, but I can't seem to get that to work. So if it's something I'm doing wrong, or if query string only works on certain columns.
No, query string should work on everything. That's why I call it my Hail Mary pass. So to start with, the first thing you can do is, if I understand your question correctly, is, hey, you know, how do I know when I type interface show or interface unique or whatever, what are the possible filters? Because you can only see one at a time and it's a long list. How do I do that? Again, interface help is any help is your friend here. So if you say interface help, command equals show, you will see all the filters that you can apply. In this case, it says you can use port mode, you can use MTU, you can use the interface name, you can use VLAN, you can use VRF, etc., or the type or the state. So those are your favorite ones that you can use directly in the command line itself. For everything else, you'll have to use a query string. Do you have a specific thing you are looking for? I can probably type it here and we can see what you're looking for. Rather than the query string, if you can tell me what you are trying to do, I can see if I can type the query string.
Yeah, so what I was looking for was on the interface assert was queries that, anything that had actually failed. Because if you just do interface assert, you get the list of you get everything, don't you? So yes. I just wanted to find the ones where the result was a fail.
The result was a fail. The status was failed. Oh, yeah. That I think is fairly easy, right? You simply say interface show, and I'll use now one of the anonymized customer data here. It does have the serial number, so I can't show serial numbers. But interface show, if I do interface show and I say namespace equals Acme, and I say status equals state equals, and you have these choices. You can say down or not connected, then you can just use that and you would get the output. Or are you looking for specifically error disabled?
No, so if you do an interface assert.
Interface assert.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Interface assert, you simply type result equals, so let's do that. Interface assert, namespace equals Acme. And if you say result equals fail,
Oh, God.
then you will
Okay.
only get those interfaces that failed. In this case, there's nothing.
Yep.
Make sense?
That was easy, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, but again, my take is like what I realized many times is because this is something I kind of wrote a lot of, I could remember many things, but they're not obvious, which is why I use the help a lot to specify. So in this particular case for you, Stephen, if I went back and I said instead of show, if I typed assert, command equals assert, you would see that there is a result. Show only assert that matches this value.
Yep. Yep.
And that's probably not clear enough. I should say show only assert results that match this value. Okay.
Dinesh, one of the ones I've been starting to play around with. So I'm trying to find like all of the routes that are like local to the site, right? So basically connected.
Okay. If you're looking for routes that are connected, so what you would do is you type route show and you'd use protocol. And if you look at protocol, there are various options. So the first thing I would do is I would say route unique, column equals protocol, and I would say namespace, for example, is NXOS fine. So that's because I changed. So I would get this where I have something that is direct is what I believe
Yes.
calls it. And so I would be able to type that. So then I would say route show protocol equals direct and namespace equals NXOS. And you get the list of all the locally connected routes.
Beautiful.
Now, truth be said, this is kind of not a good thing. I think this is a bug that we need to fix. So I'll make a note of it that basically we should not have direct connect, all of that. You should simply have one value because basically the idea is you should have the reads be vendor agnostic. So you should be able to say connected for everything or direct for everything rather than figure out what it says for a particular thing. So for example, if I did this across for Junos, you would see route unique. If I did this for Junos, you would see that it also has direct, so that is good. But I think if you do it for Cumulus, it has kernel, I believe, as the default. And so kernel needs to be converted. And if you do it for Arista, I believe it uses connected. And it does have direct, but it has direct and connected. I need to, and I suspect this direct actually comes from the Junos that is in there. So if I put a host name equals LeFo1, now I'll see, and you see you only get connected. So Arista uses connected. So I should change Arista's connected to direct. I'm making.
And what if I wanted to look at everything that's connected or static?
Oh, then it's if you want to do that, then coming back to, let's go back to this whole thing. Where was this? Sure. Okay, so you just specify direct and static.
Oh, very nice.
That's it. Then you get everything that's direct and static. You can see the static entries there.
Yep. How about, again, back to replacing a bunch of switches. One of the checks we do is basically, do I have all my routes?
Okay.
So I want to see the routing table, at 5 a.m. And then we spent the day replacing, switches. So that I want to see the routing table at 9 p.m. or something like that.
Right. So one way to do that, so there is no direct, easy way to do that from within So let's start with that. The first thing I would type route summarize, and I would say namespace equals NXOS, and I would see, look at this.
Oh,
How many
yeah.
devices are there? How many unique
How many
prefixes are there?
prefixes?
How
Yeah.
many unique VRFs? Total
Yep.
host routes count. So all of this will give you a quick summary of, does this look right?
Yep.
Now you just type it for a different time and you'll get the same data. And now you
Yeah.
can eyeball the two and see whether that makes sense.
Okay. That's even, yeah, that tells me pretty much everything I want to know right then and there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank
that's
you.
what I would use. So summarize, the basic idea with summarize is to always be able to eyeball and present enough information in here for you to be able to look at and say, yeah, I understand what's going on here, as opposed to you having to look at reams and reams. So one of the things I don't do, for example, is, and people have noticed this and talk about it, is if you have got 1,000 rows of a routing table output, I don't display all 1,000 rows. So if you do route show, just to give you a sense, I believe this one has a lot. No, because I changed. If I do this, I get, a lot of routes. I basically only show you some portion of them. I don't show you all of them. I don't show you all 82,000 rows because that will take a long time to display, number one. And number two, it just is sitting and eyeballing by scrolling is what people did in the past. And I don't necessarily like to do that. But let's assume that you say like, no, I do want to be able to see all of that. And I want to see it with, and maybe I'll run it and I want to do something the equivalent of a grep. My take is if you're trying to do a grep, just type whatever you're going to grep for in the prefix filter. That's all. Or any one of the million filters that are available with route. Again, you type route help and command equals show, and you'd get all the filters, and you can just figure out which filter do you want to use. Do you want to filter by prefix length? Do you want to filter by prefix? And you just type that and you get what you want. So rather than waste time trying to do grep, you could just use it this way.
It's muscle memory, Dinesh.
I know. And I know how bad muscle memory is because I have been trying to see if VS Code is really any good because I've been a long time Emacs user. I guess my gray hairs should tell you that. I use Emacs for everything. And so, I basically have been trying to see for Python, is VS Code any better? And I keep typing the wrong keys over and over again. And I got frustrated and I threw it away and I went back to Emacs. But I'm starting a second trial now to just see if it would work. And the first thing I did is install the Emacs keyboard for VS Code.
Of course you did.
So I understand the problem of muscle memory. Any other questions? Duane, did you have anything that you particularly use that you find useful? Can I put you on the spot by asking you that question?
I mean, we don't use it that deeply. I mean, we're just a lab, so we're just really tracking changes and stuff. I'm really using the API a lot to help find stuff, and just like on a day-to-day basis, somebody's using it every day just to try to find where a MAC went or an IP address, how it changed, or just file the history of it. But yeah, I like to use the API as well. So I know you don't do a lot of demo here of that, but it's pretty cool too.
Yeah. So from that perspective, one of the things I did not mention last time, and you can do this, is what you can do is, suppose, for example, you're running on machine A and you've got all your data with the SuzieQ server and the Polar running on machine B, and you want to access it. And you're like, dude, I every time have to SSH into that machine to do it. You don't have to. So what you can do is you can go to that machine. Let me get out of this. Go to the SuzieQ and go into my shell. And if I start the REST server, so basically I start the REST server here, then in my Oh, I started it in this shell. I closed actually one of the shells. 1 second.
Yeah, but Dwayne, I'm doing a lot of the same things. I know the data is in SuzieQ. I'll just write a quick little, I now have just a standard function, right, to send a REST call to SuzieQ with, try accept blocks and error catching and that kind of stuff. And
Right.
then outside of that, I'll craft whatever I want to ask, and then I just send it to the function and then parse whatever I need to. I just did one yesterday along the multi-Mac question that Dinesh helped me with, right? I need to know every interface. And then I took the Mac, I called the ARP table, I got the IP, and then I just did a reverse lookup to get the host name of that thing and send it to my client, said, okay, here are the things, hanging off that port.
So if you take a look at this, in this, there is something in your SuzieQ config file. There is something called engine, and it is set to pandas by default. If you change this to REST, now I can run the command over here. Oh, what happened here? Oh, I know what happened. Export. Sorry, my development environment or whatever I'm doing right now got in the way. What happened? Oh, I didn't do poetry shell. Yeah. So basically, if I look at this, you see at the bottom here, the engine, it says is REST. Now you can type in the same CLI, but it'll send REST commands to the REST server on the remote machine and get you the data. So for example, you can type back to, I want to see device show namespace equals, I believe NXOS fine, and you get the output. So from your perspective, this looks exactly like that. But if you go to the other window, you'll see that I just sent a REST call.
Yeah.
So this is the remote CLI, what we call the remote CLI. So you don't have to have a CLI running on your local, you don't have to have the data on your local machine. You can simply point to a remote machine where the data is, as long as it's running a REST server, you can access it this way.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I thought I saw something about that before, but this demo definitely helps make it easier to leverage. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. And like I said, again, all you have to do is go into the SuzieQ config, change the UX from engine to REST, and we will just take all the data that you already have for REST configuration and use it. So you don't have to reconfigure anything. So if you're running off the same configuration file, you just have to make sure that the REST configuration is identical to whatever the REST server is running off of. And that's pretty much it. You just say REST. That's it. You're done. You want to change it back to pandas, you just change it back to pandas. And you can do that, by the way, even within the SuzieQ CLI. You're here and you're like, you know what, I'm done with it. I want to change it back. You just say set engine equals pandas and you're done.
Oh.
So you don't have to go do that. I believe set engine REST also should work. I don't know if I have tried it. And the only way you'll know is to go here and make sure that you've typed a few keys and yep, it works. So you just have to switch. You can switch it right there. You don't have to do anything from anywhere else.
Oh, very cool.
You just set the engine to REST. So next question. If people don't have any other question, I thought I could move next to asking, if you don't mind my putting you guys on the spot, Stephen, Ankur, what brought you to SuzieQ? You are new users to the community meetup. Others have been there before. If you could tell us a little about what brought you to SuzieQ, what kind of network do you run in terms of how many devices and what operating systems? That will be helpful. And again, the purpose there is to be able to understand how people are using SuzieQ. One of the things I realize time and time again is there are lots of users of SuzieQ. I just don't know about them. The first time I know about them is when they file a bug. Or they show up and they say like, hey, I'm trying to do this. I don't know how to do this. Otherwise, and I ask them, so how long have you been running? And they're like, oh, we've been running it for the last 6 months, no problems. And I'm like, wow, okay. And you didn't feel like you wanted to join the Slack or let me know? And they're like, no. So
I'll take a go at that. So I guess, you know, I mean, literally, I turned a corner and SuzieQ was there, and it was only about a month ago. So it was a, you know, we had a particular problem, and as sort of part of the sort of the wash up after the event, you know, was looking for ways to better sort of understand how the network was operating. So, you know, we design a network, we install it, you know, it gets installed, everybody sort of does their checks, and it works as you want. But what we found in this particular case is it wasn't working as designed. So this was in this example, it was a connection to public cloud. So
yeah,
we use we have to encrypt all our data even into public cloud. It's across an express route, so to Azure. But what we had is we had some routes leaking round from another express route. So we've got multiple regions into Azure, and what we found was that our route to one region, to North Europe in this case, was actually going via UK South, but not the route to the destination. The route to the tunnel destination was leaking around. So what that meant is traffic that was going to North Europe was being sent into the North Europe tunnel, but the North Europe tunnel was actually being formed via another tunnel through UK South. What that had the effect of doing was reducing the MTU. So, you know, we yeah, it took us some time to sort of to get to the bottom of that, because yeah, it occurred because there was maintenance on the express route service, and yeah, so the peering went down, but when it came back up, you know, the NOC sort of confirmed all the routes had been received and the peering was up and so on. So as far as they were concerned, things were operating as they should, but of course now they weren't operating as the design, because I say this route that had leaked that we weren't aware of. So I say I was just sort of looking for something that was sort of that we could use to get better, you know, monitoring of whether the network is operating as we designed it to, and that's when I sort of came across SuzieQ. So so, you know, for this example, what I'm looking for is sort of a way to, so you know, I've got a destination. I know what the protocol is it's learned via. I know what the next hop that I want it to be via. So it sort of seems to me that it's, you know, it's a good use case where I can put something in place where in this particular case, I can monitor to make sure that, you know, once when there's a failure, once we've recovered from that, that the environment is operating as it should be. And then of course that sort of takes us on to, you know, well, what else can we use it for? Because, you know, starting to look at sort of what data's in there. You know, we had there was another problem, another MTU problem. This actually wasn't in an environment that we manage, that, you know, that my team manage, but it was basically it was within a VxRail, so VMware environment, and again, it's sort of a good example of where something like SuzieQ would be beneficial, because they had a failure on an uplink on a switch. It actually happened back in May and no one noticed. But when the but when the second uplink failed, and they're now using the interlink between the two switches, that connection had a lower MTU than the uplinks. So again, yeah, a significant sort of impact to the network at that point in time. So it's things like that, you know, and I think, yeah, there's lots of other cases. I mean, one of the other points I was looking at was around, yeah, we've got quite a sort of considerable sort of VM. I guess actually let's go to the your question about what sort of kit we've got. So I guess we're from a network perspective, we're route and switches, we're sort of a big Cisco environment. There's about I guess about sort of 50 or 60 offices, probably about 12,000 devices. Sort various sort of routers and switches. I mean, dating back many years, back to your days, Dinesh, of Catalyst 6500s, and so we've got kit that old, up to the sort of Cat 9Ks, 8Ks, Nexus 9Ks.
Oh wow!
So we've got a sort of fair sort of spread of kit there. On the firewall side, Palo Alto, load balancers, it's sort of F5.
Yeah.
As I say, data centers sort of across in Americas, Europe, in the UK, but also we've got sort of data centers over in Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, so various sort of places around the world.
Pretty cool. So have you been using SuzieQ across all of them, or have you tried SuzieQ with the firewall yet?
No, what I've done at the moment, and I'm just sort of using it on a test lab. So we've got sort of in our test lab we've got sort of some Nexus 5Ks, 9Ks, Cat sort of 4Ks, and some firewalls. So I'm just sort of playing around with it there at the moment, just to sort of see what it can do for us.
Got it.
So which is fortunate, because I as I mentioned in that Slack chat with you the other day, we blew up our TACAC server. I blew up the lab TACAC server, which is fortunate. So so just playing with it in the lab at the moment. But I can see even there, and the lab's actually a good environment to test it with, because a lab is typically where people go, and that's where they go and play, and they invariably don't do things as well as they would on the production. At least generally I'd hope they do things better in production. So of course, when you're looking at things that are wrong, it's highlighting quite a number of things like VLAN mismatches on trunks and things like that. So, but it's to me, it's showing up a lot of things that we can use it for. I mean, one of the other things I was thinking about was, in the past, not recently, but in the past, I've had servers that our servers are dual connected. So if we've got a sort of pair of Nexus 9Ks, we'll have like an MLAG down to our servers. Whether things are configured consistently across both switches. So I was sort of looking at seeing if I can, and I guess the other thing is whether all the servers are connected. So if the server is supposed to be connected with 2 NICs or 4 NICs, does it have 4 operational NICs or 2 operational NICs? So sort of looking through the environment, making sure that if I with VMware, where it's got CDP, can I see that ESX server with CDP? Do I see it on an even number of NICs? If not, then why not? So things like that it just means that we know that if there's a failure of a switch, then there is the resilient path for it to go through the second switch. So things like that, I'm sort of looking to see what we can bring in.
Cool. So when you looked at the route, the specific thing that you mentioned where the route was being resolved via a different path, what command did you use? Did you use route show and did you eyeball, or did you use route LPM?
It was actually this was actually on, so it wasn't using SuzieQ on that. So this was literally just troubleshooting it from the router CLI.
I see. Okay.
But I say what I'm sort of looking at, thinking is SuzieQ collects all that information anyway.
Oh yeah.
So what I can do is periodically I can just run the test, and if things aren't operating as they want, is basically just raise the service now ticket to have the issue investigated. So
so the way you do that, in case you hadn't figured that out, is a quick way for you to do that is to use route LPM. I don't know if you are aware of this. So you could type route LPM. So for example, if I want to figure out what is the path, what for this address in this particular network, sorry, an XOS. If I want to know what is going on, if I type this, sorry, I gotta put this in quotes. Why?
I think the namespace.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you get this, and you can see that it's across the verbs. What is the route that's it's hitting? So for example, on the DC Edge 01, it is using this particular route with that next hop, with that OIF. So you can get that very quickly across. If you want to reduce this further and say, I only want to see it on the specific verb, you can specify the verb and you would see it across the different verbs. And this is using the longest prefix match. That's why it's called LPM. I go look at the routing table of every device, figure out the run the longest prefix match algorithm against that address, and the hit that's returned is what is given.
Yep. That's good.
Yeah. And the other thing you can do is also, I don't know if you've seen this part, Stephen, but if I do path show, if instead of path show, I type path summarize, namespace equals NXOS find, source equals 172.60.1, desk equals 172.60.1. You'll get a summary, and in here, you will get what the path MTU is that I discovered.
Okay.
And it also tells you what the average path length is, what's the maximum path length, if there is any MTU mismatch, how many total paths are there, all of that information you get here, and whether it uses an overlay or not. And this is only supporting VXLAN overlays today, but you get all of that information as well. So this is another way for you to check.
Yeah. Yep. Nice.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that information, Stephen. Corey, I already blamed you for the multicast. When I said that we are going to do 0.20, I said like the multicast routes will be in 0.20, and we'll do some of the work Corey's been saying he will do.
Yes, I thank you for this pressure.
I was just teasing you, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. It's good though, it's good. Thank you.
Okay. So Ankur, do you want to, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. If you don't wish to say, that's fine. Do you want to tell us a little about what brought you to SuzieQ and how you're using it? Ankur, you're muted if you are speaking. Okay, I guess Ankur doesn't want to say. That's fine. People are sensitive. The companies they work for are sensitive, and sometimes they can't say. So I'm comfortable. So moving along, the last part of what we had on our agenda for today after the community meetup was to debug the SuzieQ poller. So that's what I wanted to do. But before I went there, were there anything else? Stephen, you came a little later. Was there anything you were expecting to see?
No, not to see or really share, just to take it all in.
Okay.
Thank you.
No worries.
Dinesh, is there an
Sorry.
easy, it's related to your debugging, but is there an easy way to get something that's never poll to just start polling
Yeah.
once you fix the issue?
You will have to restart the poller in the open source, unfortunately.
Okay, no worries. Thanks.
Yeah. But once you fix it, you just restart it and it should start polling. So if nobody has any other thing, so I thought let's kind of go ahead and show you how I debug the SuzieQ poller and show you some of the outputs that I look at and what do those outputs tell me. So the way you start the Polar, as always, is you start with an inventory file. So in my specific case, what I have is a machine that's already set up. In this particular case, it's running Junos, and I have a separate setup where I'm running Arista. Why I'm running those two, simply to give you a variety, B, to show you to use something that isn't heavy on resources. NXOS takes up a huge amount of resources and is slow as hell. So to start up, so I was just picking up Arista for that. Cumulus would be much faster, but not many people use Cumulus. So I fear that people, when I show them that example, they think that this is a Cumulus only solution because of my past association. So I stay away from Cumulus, but if I could, Cumulus would be the fastest. I could probably use Sonic, but Sonic images are old and not up to date, so I can't really use Sonic. Okay. So what I do is, if I do Vagrant SSH config in this particular case, and look at the IP addresses, I essentially, the simplest thing you can do is create an inventory, which is copy hosts EOS SSH hosts Junos SSH. And if I go to host Junos SSH, I can change this to Junos. I can change the URLs here. So I just go look at the IP addresses, which are on each one. So 317, 336, 318. So I could, just manually go fix each one of them. So first change all of these to 3. I could have done all of this, but I just thought I would show you what it looks like one way or the other. So it's clear to, the whole process is clear. If you have Netbox, you can point to Netbox, and I'll show you a way to using the Ansible playbook as well. But you would essentially go and configure this, and then you can start the Polar with that inventory file. So what I will do instead is just simply copy. I'll use Ansible inventory -- list. I'll send it to /temp this, and then come over here and SCP. So you've got this. Oh, did I not copy it? Oh, sorry. So then I go to temp Junos inf, change %Dinesh to D dot. This is all just boring stuff. And once that is done, I have to, of course, add the IP route to that device so I can reach it. And now, oh, I also have to go there and set up the permissions to link. It's VR1. This is just because it's running libvirt. I have to provide permissions to have it allow me to connect to all these devices from a different machine. So once that is all done, what I can do is very clearly from a very simple perspective, from an Ansible, I can simply say, there is the Ansible inventory file, which is over here. I don't need to do anything. It's just the output of the Ansible inventory. There is no change. I say that ignore known hosts is true. I set the default passwords. In this case, it doesn't matter. I created a demo setup, I can go to the SuzieQ config file and change this to demo. That's fine. And then basically, if I start the poller at this point, what is the word for it? Posts ANX.YAML. So the way I tend to want to do this, you can start it like this, and this will basically spew out a bunch of information. But what you can do is, if you want to just make sure it actually is the basic stuff works, you can simply say -s device, which is you're starting just the device service, and all you're doing is checking, can I even ping the device? And then, because I don't want to run in a continuous polling mode, I simply say --run once equals update. If I do this, at this point, I should see a bunch of things show up. And I see that I detected all the device types and I basically ended. At this point, if I go into the SuzieQ CLI and I say namespace show, I should see the Junos demo namespace. And you see that I have demo Junos namespace, and it says that I can see a bunch of things. I only took one service count. So I can say if I do device show namespace equals demo Junos, you'll see everything that I caught. And here you see there's a device which is never polled. But other than that, everything else got polled. I have leaf 1, leaf 2, spine 1, spine 2, everything is polled. And I can say like, okay, this looks good. So clearly I have connectivity now and things work. So this would be a very simple, quick ping, so to speak, the equivalent of an Ansible ping or any other ping to validate that everything is working correctly. Now, nothing happens to the data if you run this again a second time. You will see that we don't rewrite the data again and again. So for example, if you look at the Parquet output for this particular device, demo find, what's the word for it? Demo find, we look at device and we say namespace equals demo Junos, and let's take a host name and give it leaf 1. We see that there is this file. Now, if I run the same thing again, because nothing has changed, ideally, outside of demos, this should just still return that there is no real file. So if I do this, and I type this, I should see no new files because nothing really changed. Everything looks clean. There should be nothing different. Now, instead of typing it like this, you can go back into the CLI and you can say table show namespace equals demo Junos. And you should see right now that there is only one device and all the information that you are looking for is there. If we keep on running the poller and it's unnecessarily writing the data, you will see that the number of rows, the number of intervals, all of that will change. And if you want to see very quickly why a device has, did I hit everybody? You can do a quick check here and see that this tells you whether the device is. So this table show will tell you all the services that have been polled, or all the devices that have been polled, how many are there, when was the first time we polled it, when was the last time we polled it. So this is a very quick way for you to see if you want to know, is the poller running, is everything working? You can go take a look at it like this. The other way to validate that the poller is working is using poller's own command, which is called SQPoller. In SQPoller, if you do SQPoller show namespace equals demo Junos, and I know that others have seen this, but if I set namespace equals demo Junos, you'll see that at the bottom it changes here, but now I can just type table show and it will always show me everything with respect to demo Junos. I don't have to keep typing that. So if I type SQPoller show and I say this, what I get is a bunch of information. And it's useful to look at this and then talk about it one by one. I'll do the easy ones and then I'll do the bad ones. So if you look at demo 1 Junos, if you look at this, the gather time tells me how many milliseconds it took me to get the data from the device. In this case, this tells me that it took me an average of 587 milliseconds. And in this case, because we ran it just once, it took me 587. The min, max, median are all 587. This is the total time, meaning the time it took me to get the device and the time it took me to process the information. So in this particular case, it took me 587 milliseconds to get the device, and the total time was 606. So 606 minus 587 is the time it took me to process the data and write it out into the database. And the service queue size is how many people are waiting in pipeline for the computation to start. The write queue size is how many commands are waiting to be run on the node, because the node only runs a certain number of commands at a time. For example, if you are working with old iOS devices and you say slow host, or you're running with a TACAC server that is very, very slow, or can only handle a certain rate, and so you have set a low throttle rate, you'll see that the write queue size will go up. The node queue size is essentially the same. It's basically on each node, how long is it waiting for in order for it to be able to send the information. The service queue is specific to a single service. The node queue is specific to a specific node. And the write queue, I'm sorry, the write queue is specific to the writer. So ignore the write queue for a second. It's node queue size and service queue size you look at. This tells you very quickly, is everything working or not? This tells you how many bytes we got out of this. And this tells you whether the polar time was exceeded. The default polar interval is 1 minute. So imagine for a second that we took a long time to process. The polling was done very quickly. We got the data very quickly, but we took a long time to process. That's happened only once so far. But if that happens, then this polar exceeded threshold count would go up. We do not start the polar to fire and get another instance of data, another snapshot of the data when the polar is running in continuous mode till everything is done. So if you set a period of 1 minute, we don't just keep firing every minute request after request after request, keep completely saturating the CPU of either the device or of your machine because it's taking so long to complete and the data is just piling up. It's only after everything is done, we take the period of a minute and fire the next request. Does this help people see what is going on and a quick way to understand what is going on? Any questions on anything I've said so far?
Just one
Maybe you-
question on the table show.
Yeah.
So I just looking at my own, the lab that I've got this set up in. So for the BGP, for example, I see that the latest time. So it was 2 days ago that it was that was last updated. Is there? I mean, and it's not just the BGP. I mean, the inventory is the same.
Yeah.
OSPF interface, OSPF neighbor is the same. Is there a reason they're not that they?
Are
Then
they updated?
Yeah.
No. So what that tells you is that basically nothing has changed in the last 2 days. So for you to look at whether something has changed or not, what you would do is you would say SQ polar show, take your service, and in my case, it's device, so it doesn't matter. And I would simply look at the column equal timestamp. And that will tell me when was the last time it was updated. The other way you can, of course, do that is namespace show. If you do namespace show, it will tell you when was the last time it was updated.
Right. So it's still being polled. It's just
Yes.
as you say, there's no changes, so there's no table updates. Okay.
Exactly. So that is another way for you to validate what is going on. Okay. So do I know how do I quickly check if the polar is running? You do a namespace show. You do an SQ polar show with that column timestamp, and you can see when the polar last ran and whether it is running correctly or not. You want to see whether a service was polled and there were no errors. You can run this and you will see that if there are no errors. If there are no errors, the status will either be 0 or 200. Because if you're using a REST API, for example, if you're communicating with REST and you're using the REST API, then the value will be 0. And one of the things we are working on as part of the open source, but I think it will happen after the mergers have happened with all the devices, because Jeff has got Alcatel support, a couple of others have got, like I mentioned, Checkpoint and Cisco firewall support. We need to merge them all in, and we don't want to kind of hold up that. So, but once all of that is done, we want to normalize the status. So instead of seeing 0 or 200 or whatever, you'll actually see a meaningful string here so that you can debug that better. But for now, that is what you'll have to look at the number. And if you just ask me or ask the community, someone will tell you what the status means. If you see anything but a 0 or a 200. Typically, if it's a 400 something, you can just look up the HTTP service code and it will tell you what 400 is. For example, it might be it's a timeout or it could be authentication failure. The other question I get asked quite frequently is when I do this, so I ran this in run once mode, but let's assume now I want to run it in many other things. I will just run this. So now it will basically work and it will start polling. People are like, it's hanging, nothing is happening. Well, yes, it's a daemon, it's supposed to hang. I mean, if I were asked there are two frequently asked questions I always get. My poller is hanging. It's not hanging, it's working. It's just doing its thing. If there were any errors, you would see those errors here. Second, when it comes to right now, the way this is all set is it is set to poll to std out. And the way you do that is if you go in here. Yeah, let me do that and then back. If you look at your SuzieQ config.yaml, I have set the poller to log std out to true. If you change that, then it'll work differently. Okay. And what did I have? So yeah, so coming back here, one of the other things is the next question people ask is like, hey, you know, are there any problems? Is there anything going to the log? So when you log it to std out, not only are we logging to std out, we are still writing the log file. And the log file is typically /temp sqpoller0.log. You can always look at that file to figure out is there anything in there that is wrong. If there are any errors, if there are any tracebacks, because you left this running, you went away for lunch, when you came back, there was a big screen scroll, you've lost a bunch of things, look at the log. So look at SQPoller to see if there is any error. Look at the log to see if there is any problem. One of the things we do is in the poller, we want to make sure that temporary failures don't result in us basically declaring the device dead. So for example, if you have a temporary or a transient routing failure and we are unable to communicate with the device for that instant when we ran the poll, we don't want to declare the device dead. So we have a hysteresis in the poller. We wait for 3 consecutive failures before we declare the device dead. Now that's great if your poller interval is a minute. What if your polling period is 20 minutes or an hour? That means it will take us 3 hours before we declare a device down when it could have been dead for like ages. So that's one of the things we haven't taken into account yet. So people we find are largely running us in the 1 minute interval or 2 minute interval, or they're running it in snapshot mode, which is basically run once equals update. So we haven't really thought about that particular bug, but it's a bug that we will address, so to speak. So that, you know, if you set a polling interval beyond a particular time interval, we will basically declare you dead. Unfortunately, there's not very much we can do in terms of maybe we can add a retry right away, retry 3 times before you declare it dead, but retry it right away. Don't wait for the next polling interval if the polling period is very high. But all of that adds complexity. We haven't done that, but that's something to be done. But it's important for you to be aware if you set the polling period very high, that sometimes you don't declare a device dead for a while, and that's the reason. Any questions?
Is there a way to see when a device, or what time a device was declared dead?
Yes, that will be updated in the timestamp again. So let's kind of shut this. And if you go into this again and you do device device show, and you look at columns equals, let's say, host name and timestamp. Status and timestamp, you'll get this time. So if a device was dead, this timestamp will indicate when it was last polled and when it died, when we declared it dead.
But it's when you declared it dead, when you tried to pull it again and it wasn't there, correct?
Correct. I couldn't reach it. Maybe it is there. It just doesn't want to talk to me.
Yeah. I guess that's the question, right? It'd be interesting to know how many here on the call are looking for kind of up-down information. I know from what we're using SuzieQ for, right? It's not that.
So you're asking, Claudia, how many people are using SuzieQ's detection of a down to actually trigger an action suggest, hey, my device is down?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't believe anybody is.
Okay. So yeah, in my mind, you're right. I guess I don't consider that a bug. I'm polling every 15 minutes. I understand that if something changes, I have to wait 15 minutes to get fresh data. So I guess I wouldn't consider that a bug. I would consider that expected behavior, actually.
Understood. But I think the problem that happens is, the classic Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or rather, actually, now I should say Marshall McLuhan, who basically said, we shape the tools and then the tools shape us. Basically, we look at this output and we are expecting to see something. Even though everything you just said is true, it's not expected. So we kind of go like, what? And so I just want to be careful that to make people aware of that fact. And that's one of the reasons why we try very hard to try and not show you false information. Because if we mislead you, I don't care if we can't tell you something, but I don't want to mislead you. I don't want to be ChatGPT-3. We can do ChatGPT-3 confidently bullshit all the time, quite happily with the AI. I want to use our dumb natural dumbness to be able to at least not bullshit you. That's what I try.
Well, maybe in the short term to, I think you have a better understanding of how everyone's using it. Would it help to just say next poll?
That's a good idea. So where would I show that? In the SQ Polar show, maybe?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's a good one. So Claudia, if you could, I'll make a note. Never mind. Don't want to add SQ Polar show next poll. That's actually a good idea, Claudia. Yeah. Made a note. We'll file a ticket and track it. So we're coming to the top of the hour. I wanted to stop here. I hope people found this useful. We'll have this same thing in January again. If you've got questions, if you think like, hey, Dinesh, I would like to take some of this community meetup time to help me understand how to do X or whatever, please shoot me a question directly. I'm happy to do that in the next meetup. If you have any other topic, again, happy to take that up. Otherwise, the next office hours is on 13th of January. So it's always the second Thursday of the month from 8:30 to 10 a.m. PST. So if there are no other questions, then the first thing I'll do is stop the recording. Where is the recording? Remote control, pause share. I'll say stop share first. That should bring up recording.